And it started as a vision more than 2 decades ago, and today the International African American Museum in Charleston becomes a reality. News 19's Darcy Strickland takes us inside at some of what you can see when you visit.
The moment you walk into the International African American Museum in Charleston, you will know that this is going to be unlike anything you've ever seen before. Museum Director Dr. Tanya Matthews takes us through exhibits that will leave visitors with a mix of emotions, as personal experiences will color the way each individual sees the exhibits.
Where you are right now is the Gullah Geechee Gallery. Now, I would argue that every American history museum ought to have a little bit of Gullah. But here, of course, in Charleston, in the heart of the Low Country, we are still arguably the hub of this culture and this community. And so it allows us to create essentially a living history gallery and tell the story about the incredible influence of this particular community of African Americans that's still here and thriving, that really was able to hold on to our West African roots and has infused through everything that we now refer to as Southern culture.
You don't have to go into the museum to learn about some of the darkest moments of history in South Carolina. Even the land it sits on holds historical significance. The building stands 13 feet over Gadsden's Wharf, the port of arrival for almost half of all enslaved Africans brought to America.
The historic record tells us that in the early 1800s, a particularly cold winter came through, and there were upwards of 700 souls being held simply waiting for their price to go up, and they died waiting. Our storage house was one of those spaces where individuals were kept and perished waiting for their price to go up. But the way we decided to interpret that space is there's a one-dimensional brick outline that shows you where the storage house was. And then cutting across that brick outline, you've got 2 black granite walls. The interior polished so smoothly, you can see your reflection in the walls. There's a series of hunched kneeling figures within those 2 walls, obviously representing those that we lost. But as those figures get closer and closer to the water, they appear to be emerging out of the concrete. And then on the outside of that space, we've inscribed the Maya Angelou poem, "And Still I Rise." So it's always all woven in there together, never just one emotion when it comes to our stories.
The museum began as a vision in former Charleston Mayor Joe Riley's State of the City address 23 years ago.
It took us a long time to get here. The vision and the themes that you see now is not actually how we started out. That started out because we had conversation after conversation and talked to community after community, and that's how the picture got bigger and bigger and bigger. And we still, of course, can't tell it all. You cannot fit an entire culture inside any history museum, even if you are the second largest of your kind in the country. So we have a gallery, South Carolina Connections. You know, the International African American Museum is a national African American history museum with an international lean, but we understand who the home team is. And the more I read, the more I learn, the more I also realize that many of the stories that I know have roots right here in South Carolina. We, of course, have modern living history and Congressman Jim Clyburn, though some folks forget just how much history he made at the beginning of his term, so we put him in there. But then we have Althea Gibson, we have Dizzy Gillespie, we have Ronald McNair. These are stories that people know, names they're familiar with, but may not quite understand that their roots are here in South Carolina.
That looks absolutely incredible. The museum is home to 12 permanent exhibitions that include 9 galleries. According to the museum, tickets for today's opening, they're already sold out.